Well, good morning. Welcome yet again. In the sharing time, we a couple of people mentioned, like a lot of outside noise, a lot of things going on in the world that we think about and is kind of playing on our subconscious maybe as we're going throughout our lives, and are the kind of uniquely tied into what we've picked as a topic for today. We're going to be talking the topic of it is separation of church and state, but it's not exactly what it is. It's more going to be how we as a church and as Christians, as a church body, how we relate and interact with authority or government or there's a handful of things that it's kind of what this topic is about. So when we have a ministry meeting, usually the first of the year, we pick a list of topics. Separation of church and state wasn't the one that I was really hoping to get, but it's the one that I got. But it is, the more I got into it, I think it will be, fairly interesting. We've got a couple of passages that we're going to read from, but a lot of the reason why it's difficult, and I think it's why a reason why some of us struggle with maybe even the news of today, the authority of today, governments of today, is because there's not an exact science as to how we should do everything exactly. Jesus gives us some parables. He gives us some kind of rough, not rough. He gives us a general direction, but a lot of things that we have to look inside and we have to discern where we're going. So, I think, there's a lot of practical actions that kind of tie into how we live our lives. And I think us being a Mennonite church makes our stance on, separation of church and state a little bit different than most churches in America today. Before too long, there will be a sermon that comes up. It'll be non-resistance, which it's why we do that, why that is something that we believe, especially in pertaining to war and taking someone's life. So this is separation of church and state. What I'll be talking about today is not that, but it's kind of everything else around that. It's how we interact with government, but we're not going to actually get into non-resistance today. That will be a separate sermon. But we will talk about Jesus's, the main passage is going to be there in Mark. It's how Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and what does that mean for us? And that includes, paying taxes, things like jury duty, voting, running for public office. I'm going to try to get to all of it today. Hopefully no one's too upset with me at the end of the message. So really kind of anything that the church bumps into, any kind of government department, police or court system or the IRS. So let's go ahead and open into Mark 12. That's going to be the first passage, Mark 12, starting in verse 12. Give me one moment. My notes are being a little all over the place here. Mark 12, starting in verse 12. And they sought to lay hold on him, but feared the people, for they knew that he had spoken the parable against them, and they left him and went their way. It doesn't say who they are. We'll get to that in a little bit. And they send unto him certain of the Pharisees and of the Herodians to catch him in his words. And when they were come, they say unto him, Master, we know that thou art true, and carest for no man, for thou regardest not the person of men, but teachest the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? It says two groups there in verse 13. It says Pharisees and Herodians, the two different groups. And the they that sent them were probably the Sanhedrin, like kind of the ruling body at the time. The Pharisees, we know a lot about, right? They were not favored in, by the way, we're prefacing all of this. Judah and Israel is controlled by Rome at this time. It's very heavy-handed. It's very harsh. To both to the Jews and to new Christians. It's not a they are not friendly to them in any way. The Pharisees have quite a bit of power, but they do not get along with the Romans well at all. There's a fairly sharp butting of heads between the Pharisees and the Romans. The Herodians That's a group that believes that through Herod, through the family of Herod, that they're going to take back power by being peaceful to the Romans. So the Herodians and Pharisees, two separate groups. Pharisees kind of more butting heads with the Romans. Herodians trying to make peace with the Romans and kind of, ease things along that way. And that's kind of how the Herodians thought that they were going to, take back Israel at some point. Both of them want to take back Israel, but the Herodians want to do it more, gently, more through politics, where the Pharisees were maybe a little bit more staunch. But the Pharisees did not believe in paying of taxes. That's why they gave him a question to catch him in his words. It says in 13, it's kind of a trick question. The Herodians, being friendly with the Romans, obviously you have to pay taxes to Rome. You have to pay. The Pharisees, not a fan of it. In verse 14, he says they end with the question: is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not? Verse 15, we'll read there. Shall we give or shall we not give? But he, Jesus, knowing their hypocrisy, said unto them, Why tempt ye me? Bring me a penny that I may see it. And they brought it. And he said unto them, Whose image is this in superscription? And they said unto him, Caesar's. And Jesus answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. So those two guys the two groups had given Jesus a question, kind of a heads I win, tails you lose type of question, to where he couldn't really come out of it. Are you going to give taxes? Do you support giving taxes or not? And Jesus kind of in his way kind of dodges the question. Now we're gonna move on, but we're gonna circle back to this passage later. Keep those thoughts, and we're gonna circle back to this whole transcript again here in a little bit. So my topic is the separation of church and state, and kind of where does that come from? That's where does that phrase come from? We've probably heard it a lot. It's not mentioned in the Bible. It's not. A lot of people think it's in the First Amendment of the Constitution. It's not actually in there. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So it's not in there. It's not in there at all. But Thomas Jefferson, who was very instrumental in writing the Constitution, he had just become president. And there was a group of Baptists in Connecticut. They're called the Danbury Baptists. They got bothered by the kind of the wording of the First Amendment. And they wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson. They thought that, like, oh, so you're saying that the government is deciding that we can assemble and hold services. That's not a right. That's a right given to us by God. It's not a right given to us by the government. That kind of, it bothered him. So they wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson, who put the Constitution, one of the founders kind of, and who had just become president. And then Thomas Jefferson read that and wrote a letter back to the Danbury Baptists. Here's what it said. There's just a little piece of it. Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only, not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislators should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. That's where we get it from. That's where the building a wall of separation between church and state is where this whole piece comes from. Now, do notice when he says a wall of separation in between church and state, that's to keep the state from interfering with the government. I mean, to keep the state from interfering with the church, not the other way around. Anymore today, that phrase gets used a whole bunch, and it's by people that are complaining that the church should not interfere with the state. So that's, by the way, the people that often say that the loudest, that the church can't interfere with the state, it's the same people that violated that right during COVID, right? That's the same people. They said, it's been 5 years now. What were the essential businesses? I think marijuana dispensaries were essential businesses at the time. Pretty sure liquor stores were essential businesses. Churches, not so essential, at least in the minds of most people. That was a violation of the Constitution as it was written. And I think this is my personal opinion, I think we as a church I'm talking a general Christian church, should have pushed back more on that. They don't get to decide whether we meet or not meet. That's not just biblically. It's also in the Constitution too. It's like they didn't have a leg to stand on that. And we just, I think a lot of churches just kind of sat there and said, oh, well, they said we can't, and now we're not. We'll move on from that one. That one frustrated me at the time, and I think there should have been more pushback from those of us. That was not correct. Open John 18. John 18, verse 33. I'm going to read a passage there. This is Pilate in the judgment hall with Jesus. Before I read it, we talk about some of our contention today. And I wasn't obviously alive back then, but it does feel like in reading this that their contention that they had in Jesus's day was much, much more intense than anything we have today. It was very, like there was genuine persecution. There was a lot going on. There were people that, obviously trying to kill Jesus. So verse 33, then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, art thou the King of the Jews? Jesus answered him, sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have declared thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. What does that mean? What does that mean for us today? What is that I think probably everyone knows my kingdom's not of this world. If it were, then would my servants fight. That's not a new verse, y'all. We know this. But what does that look like? How do you actually flesh that out? Because that's kind of where Jesus leaves it. He doesn't get a whole lot more into the you do this, you don't do this, you do this, you don't. That was a little bit more Old Testament way of thinking. Jesus leaves it a little bit more, okay, I said this, my kingdom's not of this world. Now here it is. How are y'all going to adjudicate that? How are you going to move forward with this? Matthew 6:24 says, no man shall serve two masters, for he will hate one and love the other, or hold to one and despise the other. So there has to be a definite answer as to who is on top in our life, to who is the number one. But I want to bring up I didn't have a whole lot of material off the top of my head for separation of church and state. I called a bunch of people this week to see where they were at, to see what they thought of. The centurions got brought up by every single person I talked to. These were people that Jesus, he mentioned them in Acts 10:1. He mentioned it in Luke 7:2 and in Matthew 8:6, three different types, or three different instances. And Jesus, he speaks to them, he engages with them, and he uses them, and oftentimes he compliments them. These are extremely political people from that day, and he's often, like, he heals the servant, right? He compliments another one on, I believe it was the faithfulness that this guy had. So, like, I'm saying all this, I'm trying to, that's maybe, instead of just saying, all politics are bad, we're going to throw everything away. We have nothing to do with that. I mean, that's up for you to decide, but I am saying that centurions, Jesus used them quite a bit and spoke highly of them when he did. When he interacted with, they were used for his kingdom. And they would have been a modern day, I don't know, they weren't a mayor, but they would have been like a modern day police chief, or a modern day, they were involved not just in military, but they were very much in charge of people and kind of enforcing law. So I know that for a lot of my upbringing, I just kind of in my mind assumed that that's politics overall. It's not for us. It's not what we do. And honestly, it's not. And I think we're in some ways blessed because of it. But I will say, it does feel like we enjoy the fruits of other Christians that are involved in politics. There's no doubt. You can look at certain states. We mentioned COVID is a great example. If you were in a state that had a Christian governor, you often had, things were probably better for you than if you were in a state that didn't. Golden Dome, actually, that we use and a lot of people use, has been nice for us. That was founded by it was put together, not founded. It was put together and signed off on by a bunch of Christians that put that in place for like people like us, not just us, but us and people like us. Like, we have benefited from that, and it's not a bad thing. Like, it's been a blessing for us. So there is certainly Christians that are involved in the public sphere have been, well, at least you could say useful. It's been useful, and it's been good for us. We've certainly enjoyed the fruits from other Christians that have accepted the role of public office, even though no one in here has done that. So after saying all that, I want to circle back to the passage in Mark that we read first about the Pharisees and Herodians. And in verse 17, it concludes with, render to Caesar what is Caesar, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. What does it mean to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's? The Pharisees clearly trying to catch him in a trap. Paying taxes at the time was a very hot button topic. Roman tax law during Jesus' time, it involved very heavy layers of taxes, not just one, but there was a bunch of layers of it. It was land, property, customs. You had to pay a tax for being alive, just like every person in here, just like they called it a head tax. Every head has to pay a certain amount. This was collected by the, you remember the publicans we talked about other times. What was the name of I'm blanking on his name, of the publican that Jesus ended up talking to and communicating with. Can someone give me that name? Yes, there you go. And they were tax farmers, pretty much. They just went out and collected taxes. They were not Roman citizens, most of them, but they were very hated by Jews, because pretty much you pretty much paid for your own subjugation. Pretty much, you pretty much paid to have Roman soldiers there oppressing you. You paid for your own oppression. That's why the Pharisees didn't like it. It felt like, hey, the more we keep paying these guys, they keep soldiers here. Like, we're paying to have our own country oppressed. So Jesus saying, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, in some ways is answering that question. Like, he says, yes, you do pay. Pharisees were very much against it, right? The Herodians were for it. The methods, by the way, of these tax collectors, quite unethical. The tax collectors, they would just get employed, right? And they would just go out and harass people. And you could walk down a road, one might get you, and you get another half a mile, and there'd be another one there, and oh no, you still owe the same amount, right? There was no computer system in the day. It was whatever they decided you owed is what you owed. Definitely not a just system. They would, if you owned a piece of property, they would place like a really inflated or like just a huge value on your property. Say, the house that you own, they say it's worth twice as much, and now you have to pay taxes on twice as much. They got to do that, and you had no pushback. You had to do that at the time. They would give loans to people. We would call them kind of like payday loans almost. So I came to your house, I say that you owe twice as much. You don't have twice as much taxes to pay me. You are now in debt to me. But I can lend this to you, but I'm going to lend it to you at, a 45% interest rate. Those are the terms. The terms are my terms. And that was how everything went there. It was not like we're maybe a little bit, we have our views of the IRS, right? This was way different then and way harsher. Locally minted coins, right? These coins that he holds up the coin. It was the coin of Vespasian. That's the best way I could pronounce it. On the back side of the coin, there's a palm tree, and they put a little figure. It was supposed to be a Jew underneath this tree, and he was beaten. And the caption at the bottom was Judea Capta, or Judea Capta, which, it's Israel captured is what it means. Like, and that's what you pay with. It's in your face every day. No, you don't. You belong to us. You belong to us. That's what the Romans did. That was how they, not just in Israel, but every province that they conquered. That was the that was part of their I don't know, strategy, I guess, to keep you beat down. You're going to give us all your money, and you're going to be reminded every day that we control you. It was pretty much just a tribute to Rome. That was pretty much the main thing for them, that you will pay tribute to us, and you will acknowledge us. The Roman Empire itself grew mainly from this taxation. They didn't have much else. There wasn't much. They didn't produce much. So the provinces they captured, Israel, Judea, they funded Rome. They funded everything. Which is, another reason why there was so much frustration with the Pharisees, and why this was a hot button topic. So Jesus answered all of these things. It was a very unfair system, something that we would absolutely hate if it was in place for us today. And he says, "Render to Caesar what's Caesar's." That was his answer to all of it, it means pay. That can be a little, after you hear all of that, at the first part, the first time I started, kind of going through it, it was like, you pay your taxes. Like, no kidding. Like, what, the IRS shows up if you don't. Like, we know this. But the more you dug into it, like, they were taxed to a point to where they could not ever prosper. Like, they were taxed to a super high level, funding their own oppression. And Jesus, like, he doesn't, it would have been, certainly the Pharisees were rooting for an answer of, no, this is unfair. This is unjust. You're oppressing God's people. They're still God's people, right? This is not right. You shouldn't do. He didn't care about that. That's not what he said. He said, give. One story I wanted to bring up. There was a friend of mine. We won't go into his name, but he had, and I didn't know much about it, and I studied it a little bit this week, but he had declared himself a sovereign citizen. I didn't really know what that meant, but he said he was not going to pay taxes, and he didn't for a couple of years, and he had a business. Very similar thing. The IRS showed up, and he went to jail, and he was kind of argumentative with the judge, and he spent the weekend in jail, and then he had a very different tune the next Monday, and he was willing to pay taxes again. Like, it wasn't optional. It wasn't optional for him. My great grandfather, he also refused to pay his taxes and had quite a bit taken from him. I don't know if, Gloria knows. He had quite a bit. He had a ranch and an airfield and some planes and a bunch of other things, and I don't think he had a whole lot when they were done. So Jesus answers all of that with render unto Caesar what's Caesar's. I think we've covered that. Even though it was unfair, we do give. It's something that we do. I do want to go ahead and read. I'm going to skip ahead and read a passage from Romans 13. I'm going to read it at least now and maybe again at the end. Romans 13, verse 1. I am reading from the NIV for this passage. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from the fear of one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment to the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities not only because of the possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give everyone what you owe them. If you pay taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. So we talked about the taxes and the revenue, but then the last two phrases were what I kind of wanted to, it's what I wanted to go on. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Now, I think there's no question that some of our authorities today they don't feel worthy of respect and honor. Amen? No? Just me? They don't. But that wasn't the question though. Like that's not where, he didn't, if they're worthy of respect, then you do that. If they're worthy of the taxes, then you pay it. If they're worthy of honor, then give it. That's not what he said. So having read the Romans 13 passage, I do want to go back to a little bit. We talked about voting and running for public office. You won't find a verse in the Bible that tells you exactly what to do there, at least not that I've found. It is a fairly, in our circles, it feels like a little bit more of a hot button topic than it is in certain. I grew up in going to the Abeka Bible classes. They were very clear. No, you absolutely should be involved. Hopefully, you do run for office. That is what they, in some of the Abeka Bible classes. It is kind of what is pushed there. At least it was. I've graduated for a while, but that was what I was taught then. And then I you can hear that, but then taking into account me as a Mennonite, that's not exactly, no one here has run for public office, not that I'm aware of. Not that it's wrong to do so. We haven't. But then if you think about that, to what end? Like, is it better if we just stay out of it completely? If only atheists run for office, I don't think we'd like what we have. I don't think we would. Yeah, I think things would definitely be harder for us. How about that? We can go ahead and agree that things would definitely be more difficult and things would run less smoothly if God is eliminated. You take God away from anything, it's not going to go as well. So I'm saying that I know I'm not going to give an exact answer. The taxes is easy. I can just say, yes, it's clear. Here it's more, I don't have a verse that says, run, don't run, vote, don't vote. I don't have that. No one tells you, what to do there. So I think it is a matter of conscience. It is a matter of, I don't think it's right for everybody. I don't, but this is just me talking. I don't have any authority, to have a verse behind me to say this, but yeah, I think it's okay to be involved. I think it's okay to keep up with what's going on, but I do think that if you're paying attention to so much politics and to so much news and to so much noise outside, that can become very problematic quickly. For a lot of people, politics has replaced God. You see it for a while, it was only on the left side, right? There can be no God. We're all atheists over here. And yet inside they know someone to tell us what to do. So they replaced that with a lot of government there. And unfortunately, I think, maybe some on the right also kind of tend into that. With Trump, it was, again, my opinion. I want to talk about William. He was a 19th century English politician. He campaigned for decades to end the slave trade, which flourished at the time all across the world. He ended it in England. He didn't end it here. We fought our Civil War, right? We ended it. But how it ended, it was more prevalent in England and their colonies, and it was a big reason why England was so successful was the slave trade. And it was a Christian politician that did. He was one of the main voices that put an end to it. And there's no question that they were like that was wrong, and he did a good thing, right? So yeah, I do need to keep moving here, but I guess all I'm really trying to do today is to hold in both hands here. I don't have an answer really that I can, that I can give, but I think it's something that we need to try with our own conscience. And if the noise does get too loud, I think it's our responsibility. We have a responsibility. If the noise is too loud to where we can't focus on God anymore, we can turn the volume down on that. We can just reach out there. We're going to turn the volume down on all the outside noise, whether that's the riots that go on, whether it's we're running for office and, we're having to do deals with people that we don't want, or we're having to vote for people. Trump's not a perfect guy, and Biden wasn't a perfect guy, and you had to vote for one of the two, right? And if that becomes too much for you, it is your responsibility to reach out and just turn the volume down on that note. God's number one, and if I get clear direction on something else, we'll move into that. But yeah, it's to us in our conscience as to how, in our prayer life, that's where that needs to get decided. Real quick on jury duty. Real quick, raise your hand if you have been you got in the paper in the mail that you were selected for or you not selected for a jury, but you need to show up for jury duty. Raise your hand real quick if you have had that. Raise your hand if you have went. Couple. I've been in a handful of times. Yes, went in and not selected for a jury, but you actually went into the courthouse. Has anyone been selected for a jury? Raise your hand if you've actually. I've never been on one. I go in there and I never. William was. Was it fun? No. Yeah. Okay. We believe here, and we'll get into that probably more, someone else will, in the non-resistance aspect of why we believe what we believe about police officers, punishment. We believe not to take a life, right? Bible says thou shalt not kill. We take that very literally. We don't really give room for that. And if something does come up in like one of the questions, are you okay with having someone put to death? Like this is what they ask you, like you raise your hand or not raise your hand. We would not believe that. I guess I said we again. I think we as a church would be confident that we do not support that. I would say though, if I may. Yep.
We don't like to decide anything.
Right.
We only hear the case that we decide it's a legit case because the evidence provided and everything on that. So we wouldn't decide anything on the case itself. That felt a little different than I think deciding.
Yes. It's my opinion that having a bunch of Christians in a place in a courtroom is not necessarily a bad thing. I say that I've never actually been selected for a jury of any kind, but I do think that would be a positive thing. People with a conscience, people with morals, people that have that value is going to be a good thing for our community. But yeah, like the question there of what do you support? How do you support when they do ask, what kind of punishment are you in favor of? That's up to each person to answer. I want to read the last couple of verses in Romans 13 again, particularly verse 7 of Romans 13. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Churches have often, from the very early days of our government, had a suspicion of government. Government has had a suspicion of churches. This is pre-America even. We've always been a little kind of, just a little bit feels like on opposite sides a little bit, just kind of eyeing each other. it is, even though we live in the world, not of the world, I do think that there is room for us to be, to give respect and to give honor. And if, our government is asking of us to do something, if it does not violate our conscience, I don't necessarily believe that is a bad thing to do. So yeah, I think and just in closing, the answer to all of this is a lot of prayer. It is where, we don't have an exact verse that we can go on for some of these questions. We have to, that's kind of the scary part of it. We have to rely on God. We have to ask, where are you in some of this? The non-resistance sermon that we'll be preaching here before long will be really interesting, because it'll have, there'll be some more things on, God appointed positions, the centurions that God interacted with quite well. God appointed positions that we have said no to, and I believe rightly so. But I do think it is up to our individual prayer life as to where we come out on a lot of these things. And that in some ways, I found that to be the most challenging, is when there's not an exact answer. We have to figure that out. Where was Jesus' heart at? What would he be doing today? And going back through his actions and through his words. We read the Romans passage. We read the test that he had in Mark 12, when he says, render to Caesar what's Caesar's and to God's what's God's, and we have to figure out what part is Caesar's and what part is God's, and give accordingly. So, all right, I think that's all I have. Let's go ahead and have a prayer. Shall I close with this then? All right. Let's just stand if we can, and this will be our dismissal. Dear Lord, we come to you today and we say thank you for the verses that you've given us, Lord. Just help us to take this and to apply it, God. Help us not to go off of any person's words, just off of the verses that you have provided and the examples that you have given us, Lord, in the New Testament. God, help us to go and be good people, good citizens to those that we are around, that through us other people can see you, Lord. That is our wish and our desire today. Bless us all as we go from here. Give us a good week, a safe week. Help us to honor and glorify you in what we do. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.